We are back for another episode of BDA Baby, before, during, after baby. I'm really excited to be going live today with Dr. Cassidy. I always love being able to have a really great conversation with all people, but especially people who are in this world professionally, and doctors I find to be just so information filled. So I love doing lives like this. And this is all about identity after baby and partner relationships after baby. Sex was a really, really big and popular topic when I first started this series. And I know a lot of you guys had questions about intimacy and sex after baby and also during pregnancy. So Dr. Cassidy is going to be answering some of these questions and also just talking to me and to all of you who are watching with us today, just about intimacy and partner relationships after having a baby. So I'm really excited. I think my mom just said, "Is this about sex?"
Oh no.
Yeah,
Say,
my
mom, you might not want to tune into this one.
No, she has 4 children, so she's very well versed on all of that. Thank you so much for taking time to do this today. I'm so excited. And for those of you who are coming in, yes, sex is going to be a part of this conversation because, as I was saying, see, my mom said I did. As I was saying, sex was such a big topic, and there were so many topics that you and I were going back and forth with about what we should discuss, and we'll do a couple of these. So, but sex was such a big one. Partner relationships was such a big one. And I got so many amazing questions for you from people just wanting to know more about the changes in partner relationships when you're pregnant, and of course after baby with a newborn, and all of that. So I'm so excited to dive into this and to also have my mom watch and hear all about sex.
Yeah, I made my husband leave with the baby. I was like, babe, maybe you shouldn't be here right now, because yesterday we were watching you share that we were going to do this, and I showed him, and he was like, we just both laughed because I'm postpartum too. We've got 3 kids. Like, we're also trying to just navigate these things, navigate having a partner, navigating intimacy after a baby. And so right there with you. So I'm excited to talk about this topic today and to have your mom join in and tune in.
Okay. So I think we can first start, because so many people, as I said, when I first started doing this series, sex, how to have sex, intimacy with a partner when you're pregnant and also after having a baby, those were all a lot of topics that were really popular. People wanted to know more about, but I think we can just start by the number one question, which is, does your relationship with your partner change after you have a baby?
Yes, it does. It does. So John and Julie Gottman, they've done decades of research looking at couples. They wrote the book, And Baby Makes 3. And their research confirms what many of us experience, which is that after you have a baby, having a partner relationship, being partnered, it's hard. It's hard for most couples. More than half of couples experience actually a decline in marital or partner satisfaction after they have a baby. So you hope and maybe even anticipate that having a baby is going to bring the two of you closer.
Right.
But then you have a baby and you're in it right now. So I know you can probably relate to a lot of this. You are sleep deprived. And let's talk about that for a second. Like, sleep deprivation, it just makes everything harder and rougher around the edges. Like, it actually impacts a part of our brain that allows us to communicate effectively. And so, when you talk about like communication with your partner, now you're sleep deprived. So if there were already some challenging spots there for communication with your partner, it's potentially going to now be like intensified or exacerbated because you're sleep deprived. And on top of that, you are navigating healing. If you are the partner who gave birth, you're navigating a healing after birth, right? And like birth can also be traumatizing. So we can talk about that maybe in a little bit, but that can definitely impact somebody's desire to be intimate with someone. Your body you might not recognize your body. That can affect things as well. So we've got communication, you've got the fact that you're sleep deprived, you're navigating this brand new identity, you have less time for each other, like quality time, but also just time to repair. Like let's say in the middle of the night, and the baby's crying and none of us are at our best under those circumstances. And you say something really nasty to your partner, right? Or you snap at them. And then there's just less time to reconnect, to repair, because you're just, for a lot of parents, a lot of them are in survival mode and didn't anticipate it or expect it to be that way. And so now you feel like, well, maybe there's actually something wrong with us. But let me throw a few other things into the mix that can make it challenging. Boundaries with in-laws, because now this isn't just like your mother-in-law, father-in-law, or your extended family. Now there's a baby involved. These are grandparents now.
And especially during COVID, boundaries
oh my gosh,
crazy.
Yes.
I've talked to a lot of people who've had babies during this pandemic, and it's like the whole boundary aspect of it was already complicated before the pandemic part. And then just having boundaries and also navigating, the world with a newborn and in a pandemic. And especially with the fact, I remember my pediatrician saying to me, before this pandemic, people would rely heavily on their moms or their sisters or, close friends to help out when it comes to just things that need to get done when you have a newborn, and support and emotional support, but also just being there to help out with the baby. And so much of that can't be done, obviously, in person now because of the pandemic. So it's also navigating that part of it, and how as a new mom, you get support from people. Obviously, FaceTime is really helpful, but that's a big part of that. And also, you're with your partner, I think, a lot more than maybe you would have been pre-pandemic times.
Yeah, absolutely. And for some couples, I have definitely heard the stories from couples where they're like, wow, we're actually now like more in this together. But also there's the challenges, right? Because now, well, my partner is here, but they're working in another room, but I still feel like I'm doing this, navigating this postpartum alone. But yet they're like within arm's reach, and I'm not getting the support that I need or that I feel like I need. Gosh, there's so many ways in which it can be challenging. And unfortunately, though, there isn't a lot of preparation beforehand for couples.
How do you prepare for that, though? Because I feel like all of the things that you were just mentioning, if it's sleep deprivation or if it's adjusting to your body, healing, adjusting to having a newborn, all of these things are going to happen regardless. And so, some people might think, okay, this is coming, or have had a child and know that this is coming. But even if you prepare for it, how are you supposed to make that time with your partner go a little bit more smooth?
So I think it's first and foremost, well, one thing, you had my colleague, Dr. Christine Sterling, you did a live with her a while back on postpartum depression, and she's an OB/GYN, I'm a family therapist. We realized that there needed to be a bridge between her world and my world, because unfortunately there's so much disconnect, and that's not helping any new parents if our worlds are disconnected. So we actually created a course called Prepared Postpartum, where it's meant for couples to support them in preparing for all of these things.
Oh, great.
But a couple of things that I think are really important is before your baby is born, start talking to your partner about some of the expectations and desires around support and roles. Like, have that conversation beforehand. So many couples, they find themselves like kind of doing something or having a certain role in the relationship or in their family life. And when you ask, hey, how did you guys decide who was going to do what and how this is going to look? They're like, well, it just sort of happened, right? Or it just kind of, this is kind of what happened in my family of origin. So we just kind of adopted that, even though it didn't work in our family of origin and it's not working now. So having these conversations ahead of time. If there are any pain points when it comes to the partner relationship around cycles you guys get caught up in or communication challenges that the two of you have, just anticipate that becoming a parent isn't going to just magically bring the two of you closer together and resolve those issues. And so whether that means being proactive and saying, hey, doesn't mean that we are totally falling apart and on the verge of divorce if we seek out a couples therapist. Like, let's actually be proactive and talk to somebody so we can understand some of the cycles we get caught up in. Maybe we get caught up in like a pursuer distancer sort of dynamic, or maybe one of us is an internal processor. Like, we need time and space to think about something and process it before we're ready to talk about it. And maybe the other one is an external processor and likes to kind of talk it out as they're figuring something out. They just want to have someone there to talk it out with. And then you get those two together. This is me and my husband, by the way. He's the internal, I'm the external. And I'm just like, come, let's just talk about it. And he's like, whoa, I need space. That feels like rejection to me. And for him, it might feel like I am like trying to trying to kind of control the dynamic or the conversation and not giving him space. So address those things beforehand and be proactive and talk about some of those different roles and expectations that you guys want to have for each other. And talk about things like your different love languages. I just shared a post today about some of the different love languages and how this can show up in postpartum. For instance, my partner, his love language is touch. And I have a 6-month-old. Like, I'm breastfeeding, I'm touched out by the end of the day. And so if he comes up and he's trying to cuddle and I'm like, I've had a baby attached to me all day and like everyone's home all the time, like this isn't a no, he's going to also take that as rejection. And so talking about these things beforehand, like, get a sense of what are our different love languages. Let's try to get like bilingual in some of these different love languages so that we can understand and kind of not get lost in translation. Like, when he fills up my gas tank, that's actually an expression of love for him because he's also an acts of service guy. Whereas for me, I'm like, no, I need words of affirmation. Like, tell me I'm doing a good job. Like, tell me that you love me. But words aren't like his strong suit.
You can do that quiz online, and it's such a great thing. I remember my mom sent that to me and my siblings a long time ago, and it was a really great thing. And I also did it with my husband, and it's so interesting because it's true that everyone's love languages are different, and it's also it's such a great tool to have in a relationship, and an empowering one to be able to know what your partner's love language is and how you can tap into that, and also knowing that might change and evolve, especially postpartum, and being able to, as you're saying, be bilingual in them, which I love, is such a great thing. Because I remember reading a book right before I gave birth, and I was reading a book and there was a whole section in there on partner neglect, which I hadn't even thought of. And I was like, oh my gosh, this isn't something that I've even thought of. Is that possible? And I remember when I first came home and I was like, oh my gosh, I have to remember to focus on the partner neglect aspect of it, because it is. And that was another big thing that that people wanted to know more about, was how do you find time to focus on your partner and make your partner still feel seen and loved and touched and have words of affirmation and of course intimacy, which we'll get to that after. But how do you do that, and how do you navigate that with a newborn who's breastfeeding, who needs you constantly, but you also want to make your partner feel important and seen and loved too?
Yeah, I think it's so critical to kind of come into this parenting journey with each other like together, like seeing that you are actually like you're both in this, and having open dialogue about the fact that like this, like I wish that we could have more time for each other. Like I miss you, right? Like being able to actually express that while honoring the fact that like things feel really different right now, and we are trying to kind of renegotiate how this is going to look. And I want to put this in context, the question you just asked, with the situation we're in right now, which is before this pandemic, I would have a totally different like piece of advice. I would be talking about being really proactive about having people come in and help, so that the two of you could even just go for a walk, or go like for a car drive, or have somebody take the baby out for a walk. And like, if someone is in your quarantine circle and you're able to do that, do this. Like, don't be afraid to ask for help. And try not just, it's so hard. We want to kind of micromanage how that happens. And I just think at the end of the day, you need a break, and you and your relationship need some space. And so if you have the capacity to have somebody come in and help, then let's do that. Whether that's taking the baby and the kids out of the house, right? Or maybe it's, you know, they come over and you guys go somewhere, just the two of you. And, you know, if you are breastfeeding, that can be difficult also to leave the baby, which is why I think it can be really helpful early on to kind of work with a lactation consultant to help you figure out how are we going to also introduce bottles, and what's that going to look like. But when it comes to the times we're in right now, where that's just so much harder, right? We have to just kind of get more creative. And for instance, and this is gonna kind of come back to some of the intimacy stuff too. Let's say I am, you know, brushing my teeth, washing my face. My partner comes by and he's, you know, smacks me on the butt, or he's like, I miss you. Like, can we like find a time to like, I miss you. Like, what about the two of us, you know? Yeah. Okay. If I am already feeling like I feel touched out, the point being, in terms of getting alone time, a lot of times what this takes now for couples is they have to get creative and they have to be communicating with each other. Mm-hmm. So if I know that like, hey, after the baby goes down, like I don't want to be so exhausted that I literally have no capacity to like even spend quality time with you, like sex aside, like just even spend quality time with you. Like if I'm feeling so burnt out and touched out, I'm going to share with my partner, hey, babe, like I really need a break, you know, and I need a break where I'm not needed. I'm not being touched. I need a long bath. I need you to take the kids out of the house. Mm-hmm. I need a break so that I can come back. So that tonight I have gotten some of the restorative rest and a break where I can then like spend time with you and not just be like a walking zombie. And so we have to get more creative, and we have to find ways to communicate these things with our partner, so that we can, like, it takes him too to share it, to say to me, I really miss you, you know, because I might be so, this is just our dynamic. I might be so caught up in the kids' worlds that I am neglecting him. And he has shared with me before, I feel like I am like number 4 or 5 on your priority list. It's like the kids, and then it's like, you know, maybe the dog and your work or something else. And so when he can share that with me, and what he's doing in those moments is he's being vulnerable. Mm-hmm. And he's softening. So when we can soften our like approach into these conversations, I'm so much more willing to receive it. Like if he came up to me and he was like, you don't care about me. You never want to have sex. Like you like care about everyone else but me. And he came at me like that, or even more angry. I'm potentially going to get defensive because that's triggering something for me. Right. But if he's able to come in and like softened way and be vulnerable, like I'm feeling lonely, like I miss you, or I'm feeling really disconnected from you. Mm-hmm. If he comes with that, I'm so much more likely to feel like okay, yeah, no, I'm sorry, you're right. And then also then communicate what it is I need so that I can, when the kids do go to bed and, you know, before the baby wakes up 2 hours later, like
Yeah.
have some capacity to be there with him, whether it's just to cuddle on the couch and watch a movie together because I'm not ready for sex yet, postpartum, or just to have space to talk or for intimacy, right?
Right.
All of these things.
Yeah. So let's talk about sex,
Yes.
because that was such a big, as I mentioned, such a big topic. How you navigate intimacy and sex during pregnancy and of course after pregnancy. There were also a bunch of questions about when you can be cleared to have sex after you have a baby, which I believe for most people is 6 weeks. But of course, talk to your doctor about that. But sex after having a baby, people were just asking a ton about how to navigate that. Is it going to be different? How do you prepare your partner for that if you're the one who's had the baby? How do you navigate that if your partner is nervous? So let's just start by talking about maybe just initiating intimacy or sex after having a baby for the first time, because that was a big question.
Yeah. So first, definitely what you said, you want to talk to your OBGYN, your doctor, and you want to acknowledge the context of your experience, right? So intimacy after you've had a baby can be challenging for most people, most couples, maybe both, because you're both sleep deprived, you're both navigating less time alone. Maybe you have a baby sleeping in the room with you in their bassinet. It's the environment and context for most couples can be challenging. But for the partner who gave birth and or is potentially the feeding source for the baby, there's also things happening that can make sex challenging. So if you are breastfeeding or you are the feeding source for your baby, your hormones are impacted. And so your estrogen is actually lower. And what that does is it can actually in some ways mimic menopause. And so sex can actually be painful and you can have very low libido because your body is like, oh, we just had a baby. Let's not have another one right now. And your body is so wise and sends signals to try to make sure that doesn't happen, which is really hard because now libido is low. And or if you are like, okay, I want to have this intimacy with my partner, and it could be actually quite painful, and it could be painful for other reasons. Maybe you had a laceration, or or your birth was traumatizing in different variety of reasons, and our body holds trauma in it, and so that can impact all of these things. And so for a lot of these reasons, I think that talking to your doctor or seeking out professional support can be really important, whether that's individual therapy, couples therapy. I just want to kind of give all of that, precursor information that a lot of times there's so much nuance to these experiences. But let's say you want to be intimate with your partner. You want to have sex and you're trying to figure out, okay, how do we initiate and how do we kind of navigate this? So first, kind of coming back to what I was saying earlier, let's say your partner is kind of giving you the cues that they are interested in wanting to have sex, but maybe you're not totally right there. Okay, I love using a scale. A scale means, let's say a 1 is I have the stomach flu and I am so not interested. And 10 is I'm already taking my clothes off and I'm ready to go. The reason that I'm bringing this up is because a lot of times how we experience these conversations is either you always want to have sex or you never want to have sex. So a lot of times we experience it you never want to have sex. Well, maybe I'm not at an 8 or 9 like you are, but maybe I'm at a 2 or 3. So let's say my partner instead comes up to me, he's like, hey, I'm you got the clear from the doctor, I'm at an 8, I'm at a 9. I really miss you in those ways. And then let's say I've just had a long day with the baby. I'm super tired and I'm breastfeeding and I don't want to be touched. And let's say I'm like, you know what, babe, I'm at like a 2 right now or a 3. So what we can do in that kind of dialogue is then he can maybe say to me, all right, is there anything I can do to help you get closer to where I'm at? And then that gives me an opening to explore what I need, right? Like maybe I do need a break. Or maybe I'm just like, you know what, it's not happening today. I'm not there. Is there anything that we can do to kind of help meet some of your needs without sex, right? And that might look like, okay, well, let's find a way to just get some space so we can cuddle, you know?
Yeah.
I'm going to move to just another part of the house because the gardener is, of course, here
I
right
think
now.
that's great to be able to use that scale, the S scale, because I think a lot of people, I mean, I know I have a lot of girlfriends who've had babies. And I think there's, you know, girls and women, we all talk about like what that's going to be like your first time after you have a baby, how to even go about that. Is it scary? What is that like? And then on top of it, also, you know, your body is still healing. Your body's changing constantly. So there's that part of it, which is a physical part of it, but also emotional part of it as well. And so there are a lot of different factors that I feel like come into play there. And then there's the anxiety of it, of course, just being the first time after you know, have had a baby. So there does seem to be like a lot of factors for women to keep in mind when thinking about that.
Absolutely. And I think that, you know, what kind of doing this sort of rating thing of just like letting your partner know where you're at, what I think that it can do also is it can open up dialogue, right? Like it can open up like I'm at like a 2 right now. It's like, well, why are you at a 2? You know, and well, I don't really feel comfortable in my body yet, or like I'm worried that it's going to hurt, or I am like just so tired, or I'm feeling really touched out. And it just provides an opportunity for us to have dialogue instead of like, you're over there and I'm over here, right? It just gives us a chance to have a conversation about it. And I think what we know is that different people are impacted by stress and their environment as it relates to sex in different ways. So there are some people who like just knowing that like, you know, your kids are on the other side of the door and being postpartum and the stress that comes with that, that's enough to make them just like that part of that part of that arousal, that desire, like that part of them is just, it's not it's not turning on for them. It really impacts, it's a libido killer.
Right.
And then there's other people where they could be, my colleague, Dr. Sterling, she uses this analogy. She's like, they could be on the Titanic and it's sinking and they're still ready to go, you know, like that, those sort of environmental factors don't impact them as much. And so I think as the more that we can open up dialogue to the different ways in which we are experiencing our lives right now, the stressors that we're having, where we're at, and like communicating what it is that we need to feel supported and to feel like we're ready to have that level of intimacy with our partner for a variety of reasons. All of those things are so important. And
I think also keeping in mind, I mean, the Instagram live I did last week with Lauren Everts, we talked a lot about hormones, and hormones, as you were mentioning, especially with people who are breastfeeding, and also just people who, when you've had a baby, your hormones go through this crazy roller coaster ride. And hormones do play a huge part in your sex drive, libido, how that's, you know, how you manage that. That could be different than when you were pregnant. A lot of people I had a lot of girlfriends who talked to me about an increase of sex drive when you're pregnant and then a dramatic decrease after having a baby. But that's all things for you to get used to and your partner to get used to, because there's a lot that's changing in life in general when you have a baby and when you're pregnant. But then on top of it, dealing with your hormones that, you know, one day you might, you know, be ready to take your clothes off and the next day you might not be at all.
Yeah. And I mean, and then throw in, you know, postpartum depression, postpartum anxiety, and all of these things. And, you know, this isn't just, postpartum depression isn't just something that the partner who gave birth can experience.
Exactly.
After our first, my partner, my husband experienced postpartum depression, and that really impacted energy and a lot of these things, right? That
Yeah.
can be libido killers and challenges. And so I think that there's so much going on. You are navigating maybe healing, becoming a food source for a brand new little human, potentially, this new identity. You're not sleeping well at night. You're navigating now how everything has gotten intensified. Boundaries that were challenges before, and now they're more challenging with maybe your in-laws. And that can put a strain on a partner relationship because you're
Right.
trying to figure that family stuff out too. There's just so much going on, Katherine, after we have a baby and we're postpartum, that of course couples are struggling, you know, but unfortunately we don't talk about this enough, and we don't
Yeah.
prep couples enough. Like we'll talk about birth, right? I think people get a lot of support around what birth is going to look like, but
Yeah.
then it happens, and it was maybe really intense, and it's really important to prepare for it.
Yeah.
But then they hand you this brand new little human, and you and your partner, if you're partnered, look at each other like, whoa, now what?
Yeah.
Everything feels like it's changed. And
Right.
there's so many challenges that can come with it. So of course it's going to impact your partner relationship.
Yeah. I think obviously, like we've talked about in this conversation, communication seems to be the number one most important thing before you have a baby, during your pregnancy, and of course after. Just being able to have that safe space between you and your partner where you can communicate your feelings, your emotions. Obviously, that's easier said than done for a lot of people and in a lot of relationships, but that seems to be the number one most important thing when it comes to navigating intimacy and also identity
Yeah.
postpartum. What would
Yeah.
you say would be two other big tips for people that they can kind of take away when
Yeah.
it comes to navigating that part of their identity and life after having a baby?
Yeah. So can I say a few more things about communication to kind of like
Yes.
just kind of deepen it? Because I think what I hear, what most couples say to me when they call seeking couples therapy is, I hear this all the time. My partner doesn't communicate. My partner just doesn't communicate. Or like we'll try, and then like before you even know it, it's like we're yelling at each other and it's spiraling. So the first thing, this is a weird thing about communication, is that you actually can't not communicate. We're always communicating. So even if like I say something, like, so if me and my husband are in couples therapy and I say something and then my husband just like crosses his arms and rolls his eyes and looks the other way, and I can be like, see, he doesn't communicate. Like, he doesn't
Right.
say anything. It's like, no, actually, he's communicating quite a bit there just with his body language. And so I think that if we can identify communication as being something that goes beyond just what we say, but like how we act, our tone, right? Our body language. We're always communicating, and we're always trying to interpret what our partner is communicating. And so what happens is so many couples will get lost in translation. So I might say something and I'm intending it to be one thing, but my partner, based off of maybe my tone, based off of his own stuff, his own historical stuff, he might interpret what I'm saying as being totally off and not what I intended. But then he responds based on how he interpreted. So one of
Mm-hmm.
the things that I recommend for couples, all couples, is to just, one, when you're talking about something that's as important as your relationship, parenting, intimacy, slow down. First, slow down. And when your partner says something, before you just jump to your reaction, right? I want you to actually first check in if you got it right. So it could go something like a script. It could go something like this. Okay, so babe, what I'm hearing you say is this. Is that what you meant? And a lot of times,
Imago communication, right?
yeah, yeah. So, and a lot of times, what will happen is then your partner's like, "Whoa, that's not at all what I meant. Like, this is
Yeah.
what I meant." So it's
Mm-hmm.
just slowing down the process. Really hear, really try to make sure you got the message right before you respond. Which, oh my gosh, is so so hard. I'm a therapist, and my partner and I get caught in these cycles all the time of just
Right.
like assuming what they're saying and then just reacting and responding out of a place of defensiveness, rather than making sure that we got it right first. Because a lot of times we actually miss that, like, we want the same things. Like, at the end of the day, me and my partner, we want to feel connected. Like, I want to be in a relationship where we have a healthy sex life and we feel connected to each other and we feel like we're on the same page when it comes to raising our kids. And he wants that too. But it's so easy to get caught up in assumptions or defensiveness, or just not slowing down, and assuming that, like, he just wants sex but doesn't want to connect with me. It's like, well, he probably does. He probably wants both. But if I don't slow down and see where he's at and then communicate what it is that I'm experiencing and what I need, then we're just going to get so lost in translation. And it's so hard to unhook ourselves from these cycles sometimes. So slowing down, really checking in to make sure you hear your partner around any of these conversations. And then, yeah, and then I think the other piece is softening. And so I mentioned this earlier, like when we're in a safe partnership, right? Like, not all relationships feel safe, but if this is a safe relationship, if I can soften and be vulnerable and say, hey, I'm really struggling. Like, I don't feel like I'm cut out for this. I don't feel like I'm a good mom. Like, I feel like I am not a good partner. Like, I feel like I'm really letting you down. I feel whatever it is that I'm feeling. If I can open up with, like, not just the frustration, anger, defensiveness, but I can look to see what's underneath that, it's probably something more vulnerable. And if I can open up and share that, that's what we call like a softened startup. And when you soften your startup in dialogue, it actually, if how we start the conversation usually predicts how it's going to go. So if I can open up and be vulnerable, he is most likely going to soften too and hear me and be more likely to listen and hear me. And it goes both ways.
Yeah. I think it's also, worth pointing out, I think there's so much great awareness around therapy, couples therapy now. And obviously, not everybody has access to that. But I think if you do have the ability to go to therapy or go to a couples therapist, that's a great thing to be doing. And to be doing that before you have an issue or a problem is always great as well. I know that before my husband and I got married in the Catholic Church, they have you go to couples communication and counseling before you even get married. And it was such an amazing experience to be able to have that. And I always say that it's such a great thing to do before you have anything come up, because you really are educated on how the other person communicates. And like you're saying, be able to say, like, did I hear that correctly? Like, those are all things that I know that, my mom always talked about. That was never even discussed when her and my dad were, first in a relationship. And it's such a recent thing, and it's such a gift to be able to have for everybody who's in a relationship now and going to be in a relationship, just to be able to have those tools to understand how, to communicate better, more effectively, more efficiently. And that helps in so many areas, but it also obviously helps when it comes to sex and intimacy, baby or no baby, really.
Yeah. And you mentioned something, that therapy can be expensive. And so just a few resources that I'd love to share, or like ideas of how we can find a good therapist. So I think first, if you do have insurance, oftentimes it can really help to actually see if there's coverage. Couples therapy can be more difficult to get coverage on, which is unfortunate, but I think is still something to seek out. And then if you go to, local universities or schools, a lot of times there may be therapists in training who are like getting cutting edge research and learning things that are really fresh, but can also offer low fee counseling. Hospitals, a lot of therapists are now being integrated into healthcare systems. And so I know that when I was a trainee, I was working at UCSD hospital, and people could get therapy from me for $10 a session. And then there's also other resources. Open Path Collective is a great directory that offers like therapists who are offering sliding scale, low fee counseling. And so there are ways to find these resources. Sometimes even support groups can be
right.
A more affordable approach. And then right now there are a lot of online resources, you know,
Yeah.
and so I think that while, you know, an e-course, Gardner is like right there.
It's all good.
Yeah. So while like I have an e-course, and this would never be a substitute for therapy, but it can be still a really great way to have something that the two of you can do together to really sort of prepare for some of the things that you might not expect are going to be challenges. We cover everything from the sleep stuff to the emotions of feeding to the boundaries with in-laws and all the fun things. So,
which I think is such a great thing to have now, especially because, you know, we are in a pandemic and being home for a lot of new moms can be lonely, and to be able to navigate that in a mommy group that normally would have met in person and be able to have that virtually accessible is such a great thing to be able to do. So we'll make sure to post that in the description of this conversation. And I'm so grateful that you took time to do this. I think this was really great and just so helpful. And I want to do another one because there's just so much to discuss when it comes to partner relationships and identity, and we can talk more about sex. So thank you so much for taking time to do this. You have so many fans who are so excited that I was talking to you. They're like, oh my God, you're talking to Dr. Cassidy. So I'm so excited that we were able to do this. Thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. And we got through the Gardner and my grandma calling to tell me how the COVID vaccine went. We got through it all, Katherine.
We did it. Awesome. Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Okay. Bye.